The Arctic is no longer just a mysterious destination for documentaries and photos. Today, it's a barometer for the planet's health. According to NASA and the National Snow and Ice Data Center, since 1979, the Arctic has lost ice at nearly 4.7% per decade. And a recent study in the journal Nature Communications, Earth and Environment projects that the first ice-free summer day in the Arctic could happen before 2030. Now, imagine traveling to that vanishing frontier in 1594, when Dutch explorer William Barents set sail into the unknown. For him and his crew, getting stranded in the icy, frozen tundra meant almost certain death. Barents was starting the first of what would be 3 expeditions to explore the Arctic region in hopes of finding a northeast passage. If successful, the discovery would shorten the lengthy trip from Europe to Asia that forced traders to sail all the way around Africa. While Barents never found this passage, what did return were stories of the Arctic that still live on today.
They were sailing at that point off of any known map in existence. They didn't know if they were going to try to head north of these, what they thought were probably islands, but they also thought it might be part of a polar continent. At this point, it was thought there might be a giant continent sitting at the top of the planet. And then when they did get stranded, they knew that no one would know where to find them. No one would have any idea where to go or where to look for them or where they might be.
That's Andrea Pitzer, a journalist and the author of Icebound, Shipwrecked at the Edge of the World. She says that what Barents and his crew did back in the late 1500s is the equivalent of traveling to Mars today. There was no concept of what they would find or who they would encounter while there. Pitzer herself traveled to the Arctic 3 times to get a better sense of the landscape.
First time I went, my big goal was to learn what it would be like in polar night. Since they were stuck there over the winter when there's no sunlight at all, literally the sun doesn't come up, I wanted to get a feel, at least for a few days, of what that would be like. So I went on a dog sledding expedition on Svalbard, which is halfway between Norway and the North Pole. And I went up, and it was pretty amazing to go away from the coast, away from any lights, when the only lights that were there were if there was light reflecting, a little bit of moonlight maybe off the snow. Other than that, we had to wear headlamps in order to be able to see where we were going and for the dogs to have some sense of where they were going.
This darkness and isolation can take quite a toll. Imagine several days without sunlight or seeing or speaking to another living thing. For an entire winter during the 3rd expedition, Barents and his crew fought for their lives as they waited for temperatures to rise and their ship to thaw out and break free from the frozen ice.
The ship was still frozen in June, and so they finally gave up on trying to get the ship out of the ice, and they just decided to come home in their small boats. So these are not large boats at all. They spruced them up a little bit to make them a little sturdier for the voyage, a little more appropriate for these men to try to come in as a group. But they ended up having to sail more than 1,000 miles in open boats on an open sea before they were able to find another ship that could then take them in. Many of them did eventually get back to Amsterdam.
While much of the crew survived, Barents succumbed to the Arctic winter and died on the voyage back.
It was pretty incredible because they came into harbor and immediately word spread that they had returned because they had been gone so long at this point. They had set out well over a year before, that it had just been assumed that they were sort of dead and rotten, that they had, vanished from the face of the earth. And then to show up, so many of them alive, was extraordinary.
In 2019, the ship that Pitzer was traveling on broke down, and the engine couldn't be repaired.
We had to use just sails. We didn't have any motor at all available to us. It wasn't possible to fix it while we were at sea. And so we had to come back only using the power of the wind, which is pretty incredible when the wind is not going in your direction. And that happened to be the case with us several times. So there's a thing you do called tacking into the wind, where you make very little forward progress and you're sort of zigzagging side to side, and the boat is tilted at like a 45-degree angle, and it makes for some wild seafaring. And the Barents Sea itself, which is now named after him, which is that sea between Nova Zembla and Murmansk that we had to cross, the Barents Sea has been known as the devil's dance floor for its choppiness because it has warm water and cool water coming from opposite directions and mixing. So it was quite an adventure to sail that, just as Barents would have sailed it. But for me, it really helped me imagine, what it had been like for them back then.
But back then, the Arctic looked much different. Today, massive ice sheets are melting at an alarming rate, leading to an unsustainable landscape for wildlife and rising sea levels across the world. A study in the journal The Cryosphere shows that global ice melt has accelerated by 57% since the 1990s, leaping from about 800 billion tons per year back then to over 1.2 trillion tons today. Meanwhile, NASA and European Space Agency data synthesized by the IMBY project show that Greenland alone is shedding around 234 billion tons of ice per year, a staggering seven-fold increase compared to the 1990s. During Pitzer's third voyage to the Arctic, she traveled to the same islands that Barents and his crew had once been stuck on.
The glaciers had retreated so far on the maps of glaciers that we had that it was extraordinary. The maps just were no longer accurate at all. And in fact, we saw an island there that we were some of the first people to see because glaciers had retreated so far that they had revealed an island that no one knew until recently even existed. And when we sailed into the place where their ship got frozen into the ice, we were only there a week earlier in August than they had been back in 1596. They had gotten completely frozen in, but today in that harbor in August, there's no ice at all. There's just not any ice there.
Even in recent memory, huge changes have already taken place. A few years back, almost half of Canada's last fully intact ice shelf, the Milne ice shelf in the northernmost part of the country, collapsed into the sea. This broken piece is larger than the island of Manhattan. Protecting this region isn't just about saving a remote, icy wilderness. It's about safeguarding the future of the planet. At today's pace of glacial melt, the fate of several cities and countries worldwide hangs in the balance. The U.S. Geological Survey notes that if every glacier and ice cap were to disappear, global sea levels could rise by more than 200 feet, which is enough to submerge every coastal city and island on Earth. While the Arctic has transformed dramatically since Barents first sailed its waters, climate scientists caution that the greatest mistake would be for us to sit back and accept its decline as inevitable.
And while we still have a chance to intervene and save a lot of what's left there, I'd like to encourage people to sort of see the differences between then and now and to think about what we can do to protect some of the things that Barents was the first to record the existence of.
To find out more about this topic and our guest, Andrea Pitzer, visit viewpointsradio.org. This segment originally aired in February 2021 and was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.